Hello and welcome to Natasha Explains It All. Today's episode is going to be a continuation of last episode's exploration of the sexism fallout from the Women's World Cup. I didn't think that I would be doing a second episode on this, but so much has happened regarding Spain since recording an episode just last week. And I think it speaks so deeply to the patterns and common practices of men who abuse their power and experiences that so many women can relate to that I thought it was worth diving in for a second episode. So let's first talk about what has happened since we last connected last week. So much has happened. um, it has truly been a novela, like a soap opera. And I don't use that term to be dismissive of what's happened at all. It's quite serious, but really to speak more to the absurdity and the drama that has ensued. I mean, you just can't write this stuff. This is truth is stranger than fiction, as they say. So diving into this novella. So on Thursday of last week, FIFA announced that it was going to start disciplinary measures against Luis Rubiales, who again is the head of the Spanish Football Federation. And when Spain won the Women's World Cup, he engaged in various acts of inappropriate behavior, including grabbing his crotch and lifting up one of the players in one of these like fireman lifts and carrying her around the field and like being very handsy with all the players as he was congratulating them on the stage. But the biggest thing was he kissed on the lips one of the players, Jenny Hermoso, while she was, coming onto stage uh, to receive her medal. And the kiss was clearly non-consensual for anyone who has seen the video, as well as what she has reported publicly. And there has been a lot of backlash based on that sexual misconduct. So, Thursday of last week, um, FIFA, which is the global soccer federation, announces it's going to start disciplinary proceedings against Rubiales and this is the 24th, so August 24th, and everyone is under the impression that Rubiales is going to resign. News outlets are even reporting that he is going to resign because it just everyone's basically understood of like, okay, there's already been enough drama this week. Like, this is really detracting from the fact that the Spanish women's team has won the World Cup for the first time. That should be the focus. The dignified thing, after all of the ridiculous things this man has already done and said this week, would be for him to resign. Well, unfortunately, that's not what happened. The next day on Friday, which was August 25th, the Spanish Football Federation called an extraordinary meeting where, again, everyone thought that Rubiales was going to resign. Instead, he gave this speech where he said that he would not resign and repeated that several times. He stated that he is the victim of quote social assassination, close quote, that he is being targeted by quote fake feminists, close quote, who are conducting a quote witch hunt, close quote, against him, and that he is going to quote fight to the end, close quote. And he says that everything has been blown out of proportion, that actually this is all Jenny Hermoso's fault because she lifted him up while they were hugging. And he actually asked her for permission for what he calls, quote, a little peck, close quote. And she said, okay. And that he, as I said, like, people are after him and, quote, trying to kill me publicly, close quote, and that he will not resign. And in the midst of this speech defending the indefensible, he also addresses his remarks to Jorge Vilda, who is the coach for the Spanish women's team, who again has been involved in all of this scandal because many players revolted um, against Vilda last year and refused to play because of how abusive Vilda is. And here you have Rubiales during this speech where he's accusing Jenny Hermoso of lying and saying he's not going to resign. He directs his comments to Vilda and says that he's going to renew Vilda's contract and he's also going to give him a raise of over 500,000 euros a year. And so, very much, I talked about last episode about the whole concept of men supporting each other and failing up. Classic failing up moment. Yes, the Spanish women's World Cup team, or the Spanish women's team won the World Cup, but it seems increasingly clear that that is in spite of Vilda, not because of him, and just such poor taste to be using this extraordinary meeting to defend yourself and the other person who has not stood up for the players while everyone has seen that you sexually assaulted one of the players in front of millions during the award ceremony. But anyway, so the Spanish Federation gives him a standing ovation. Everyone's clapping for him, particularly Vilda, the women's coach. Everyone at the Spanish Federation is like, "We support you, Rubiales," even though everyone else in the world is like, "What is going on? Why are you um like this is not what we expected to happen?" And like of course, the quote fake feminists close quote are the ones who are going on a quote witch hunt close quote against you. So that's always great to hear. That of course this is, I don't even know what a quote fake feminist is, but clearly women complaining is the cause of his victimhood, because that is also the tenor of the speech, that the person who has behaved inappropriately has now claimed the mantle of victimhood and made this about him and about how everyone is going after him and he has to vindicate his name, and that therefore he cannot resign because that would be, admitting defeat. So he's not going to do that. Well, that triggers a chain of events on Friday. Um, One being that Jenny Hermoso, the Spanish women's team player, as well as her union Footpro, both put out statements in response to his outrageous speech, making very clear that the kiss was non consensual, that she felt taken advantage of, that this was an employer employee relationship, that she was caught off guard, that she was, quote, not respected, close quote, that all of this is, quote, part of a manipulative culture that he, Rubiales, himself has generated, close quote, and just completely denying, his version of the events, calling this consensual and that he asked her for permission and she said yes, and she lifted him off the ground first, and all these bizarre things that he said to try to deflect responsibility over what he clearly did wrong. And so she put out a statement as well as her union being very clear that um, that she was taken advantage of. She was not respected. She does not want to see this type of behavior be allowed in the workplace, and that she also clarified that she, as well as her family and her friends, have been repeatedly pressured by the Spanish Federation to appear in that weird apology video that Rubiales put out, to release some type of statement in support of him, making clear that the statement that the Spanish Federation put out, claiming that those were her words, saying it was mutual and this, mutual celebration of immense joy, were completely false. Those were not her words, which everyone suspected already, that the Spanish Federation had literally made up a statement to try to justify his indefensible behavior. So she puts out this statement. Her union, Footbro, puts out this statement as well, making very clear what actually happened, which everybody saw anyway. But they had to in response to Rubiales' public speech um, attacking Hermoso. And then, as part of that, not only not only did all 23 players of the winning women's World Cup team from Spain announce that they will no longer play for the national team until current leadership changes. But additional women, including those women who refused to play last year in protest over conditions with Vilda, signed on to a letter saying that they will not play for the Spanish national team until leadership changes, for a total of 81 players, 81 female players signed on saying that they will not play for the national team until the current leadership changes. And that's basically all of the professional players that Spain has available for its women's team. So they've now said that statement, and so in response to that, then we're still on Friday, by the way. Then the Spanish Federation issues a statement, this very bizarre statement accusing Jenny of being a liar and saying that all of these players are required to respond to calls to play. And one of the things that I found most disturbing about this statement that the Spanish Federation put out, again, in response to 81 women players saying they will not continue to play for the national team until there are changes in leadership, is that in the statement issued by the Spanish Federation defending Rubiales, they hyper focus on this one random detail, which is if you recall, in Rubiales' speech at the Spanish Federation's emergency meeting on Friday, he makes this bizarre claim that the kiss was fine because Jenny had lifted him off of the ground beforehand. And in her rebuttal statement, she makes very clear that like the kiss was not consensual, really caught her off guard, and she was at no point seeking to lift, the head of the Spanish Federation that employs her off of the ground. And so in this statement, in response to the letter from players saying that they will not play unless leadership changes, the Spanish Federation focuses on that weird detail about Rubiales' claim that Hermoso picked him up, like lifted him off of the ground, which again is a complete red herring, has nothing to do with the fact that he kissed her non consensually. He focuses on that, and they include four still images of that interaction. No images of the kiss, by the way, but these four images with these very bizarre descriptions, basically saying that this proves that Jenny is a liar because in these photos you can clearly see that she has lifted the Rubiales off the ground. This completely bizarre defense, which again is completely irrelevant because it's not about the kiss. I don't say anything about the kiss. And honestly, like looking at what actually happened, it seems like it's far more likely that Rubiales, in his enthusiasm, jumped into her arms and then continued by grabbing her head and kissing her. But that point like really spoke to me because I can definitely relate to being in an employment situation with a male boss who tries to discredit you by hyper focusing on completely irrelevant details and in such a way as to gaslight you, to say that what happened didn't happen. And then you're caught spinning your wheels, spending energy on something that's completely irrelevant and having to defend yourself again about something that's completely irrelevant. and in such a way as to make the person who caused the harm to then be painted as somehow the victim. It's incredibly manipulative, and it is a very common tactic. This, again, hyperfixation on a completely red herring issue. And I can really relate to that. And that was a particularly disturbing part of the Spanish Federation's defense of Rubiales. I mean, it was also laughable, like this dissection of these four still images to prove something that isn't relevant to what is the matter at hand. So that is still all Friday. um and so all of that happens Friday. Okay. So Rubiales refuses to resign. Hermoso and her union put out statements setting the record straight. 81 women who play for Spain's national team resign basically and say they will no longer play unless there is change in leadership. Then the Spanish Federation issues this very bizarre, very accusatory statement, claiming that, Jenny is a liar and making this very bizarre red herring defense, to try to paint Rubiales as this poor victim of this player's behavior. Um, and again, just a little parenthesis there. One of his arguments, again, which is again completely made up, that he asked for permission to quote have a little peck, and claiming that she said yes, even though she didn't say yes, is also this part of like, again, this like hyper fixation on something that, like, okay, even if that was true, if your boss asked you to kiss you moments in like on a world stage, moments after you've had like this incredible employment accomplishment, right? In this case, they won the World Cup, which is basically the highest award that this player could ever receive in her career. If your employer asks you to kiss you on the lips in this setting, how is that voluntary? How is there any consensual answer to that? It's not a consensual situation. The power imbalance is so stark and so clear that it's just so gross. It's just so gross to have this person, um not only not accepting responsibility for himself, but also trying to shift the blame, um, onto the person that he hurt with these various theories. So, all right. So now we get to Saturday. And then what happens on Saturday? Well, Saturday, the Spanish Federation, we're now on August 26th. The Spanish Federation then issues another statement claiming that they are now going to pursue legal action against Jenny Hermoso and anyone else who is out here questioning the honorability of Luis Rubiales. And they're going to go after anyone who's spreading lies about Rubiales. So now they're threatening to take legal action against the player that he non-consensually kissed, and and claiming to go after, anyone who is basically sullying the reputation of the Spanish Federation's president. And and the just and also claiming that they have reached out to Jenny Hermoso to address the complaints that they've received about Rubiales, but she has not cooperated and she hasn't responded to any of their, requests for cooperation, which again is part of this behavior of the manipulation that is, so common in domestic violence as well as in other forms of sexual harassment and violence against women, that now she is being blamed for quote being uncooperative because she's not responding to requests from the person who abused her, who has already been pressuring her all week to issue some type of statement to make him look better. It's so bizarre, right? Moving the goalpost to say that, well, like, okay, I made this mistake, but actually you're in the wrong because you're not helping me, like, make this go away. Bro, like, you created this problem for yourself. Why are you now putting the onus on the person you hurt to clean this up? You need to do the work of cleaning your mess up. Anyway, so the Spanish Federation issues the statement now threatening legal action against Jenny Hermoso and anyone else who is, quote, spreading lies about Rubiales. Well, then FIFA suspends Rubiales for provisionally for 90 days while it continues its investigations. And they explicitly prohibit him from contacting Hermoso either directly or through third parties, which I thought was such an important point because it's so clear that Rubiales and his supporters are now continuing to harass the person that he harassed. And FIFA is saying you cannot communicate with her. And with FIFA suspending Rubiales for 90 days, that means that he basically can't engage in any soccer related activity for the next 90 days. And it's interesting, again, this is coming from FIFA, not from the Spanish Federation, which Rubiales was the head of uh, prior to this temporary suspension. And also not coming from UEFA, which is the European Soccer Federation, which Rubiales is VP of. And to this day, the European Soccer Federation still hasn't said anything, which to many people seems very bizarre why they haven't taken a stance. So FIFA, um, shockingly, honestly, has done something right by provisionally suspending this guy for 90 days, and that started on Saturday, the 26th. Continuing on Saturday, then 11 members of um, the Spanish women's national team, like coaching and training staff, resign, and they issue a statement, showing it's stating that they do not support Rubiales, and I mean it just keeps going. There are women who are part of that coaching and technical staff, and they revealed that they had been forced to sit in the front row of the proceedings on Friday, where Rubiales made his whole witch hunt speech. And they said that, as women, they were forced to sit in the front row to make it seem like Rubiales had more support from women than he actually did. And that just gave me this flashback to in the United States when Brett Kavanaugh was being considered for the Supreme Court. I was living in DC at the time, and there was this group called Women for Kavanaugh that was going around, trying to show that like there are women who support this guy who is credibly accused of sexual assault. Um and and there was like this there was this one photo that they issued on social media that showed like more men than women wearing this shirt called Women for Kavanaugh. It's just the bizarre optics and like the complete lack of introspection of like, okay, so you are being accused, credibly accused, because we all saw it, it's on video, of sexual misconduct. You non-consensually kissed one of your employees, and then who is a woman, and then you furthered your case by using women as props to make it seem like what you did to that other woman isn't as bad. Okay, very convincing. So now we're at Saturday. FIFA has suspended Rubiales. The women's national coaching staff have all resigned, except for, of course, Vilda, the head coach. He is still sticking around, even though now he like doesn't have any players because all of the players are on strike, and all of his coaching staff and technical training staff have also pieced out because they don't want to be associated with this nonsense anymore. So Vilda's like left here standing by himself, but yeah, he doesn't want to resign because remember, Rubiales promised him 4-year contract plus, that 500,000 euros a year. I mean, that's very tempting, no? And so, um, but he, Rubiales has now been suspended. So even though Vilda still wants that salary, so he's not actually going to step down yet. Finally, on Saturday, he, as well as the head of the men's national team, who until then hadn't said anything, this guy named Luis de la Fuente, both of them finally speak out against Rubiales, even though they've been supporting him all week and like clapped for him and did the whole standing ovation for him literally the day before. By Saturday night, since FIFA has now suspended Rubiales and like the coaching staff have all resigned, the players have all are on strike, Vilda finally speaks out and he's like, "Oh yeah, this like machista culture, we can't be part of this, and this is, staining the reputation of the Spanish team and whatever." Like, okay, hollow words, bro. And I forgot, like, so much has happened that even Friday as well, the Spanish government also has started like its own legal proceedings. They through their higher council for sports have started legal proceedings against Rubiales, claiming bringing charges of abuse of power and tarnishing the dignity and decorum of a sporting event. And the Spanish Secretary of Sport has said that he wants this to be Spanish football's Me Too movement. So that was all happening. And while this is all happening, okay, so we've got like FIFA has come out against Rubiales, the Spanish government has come out against Rubiales, all the players are on strike, all of the coaching staff has resigned except for Vilda. The world over, players from the world over have been demonstrating solidarity with Jenny Hermoso and speaking out about how this is such a widespread thing, about how women in sports, and speaking more specifically to the soccer world, continue to not treat women equally, and that um, they have to work in subpar conditions, and hashtags, started everywhere, including Contigo Jenny, which means with you, Jenny, and Se acabó, or it's over. And there's been various games that have been played, both men's games as well as women's games, since the Women's World Cup final, and players have been wearing bands and T-shirts and holding up banners in support of Jenny. So there's been this outpouring of support, including two men on the Spanish men's national team, Borja Iglesias and Hector Bellerin, who have submitted their resignations as well in solidarity with the 81 women's players who said, look, we're not playing until there's changes in leadership. So all this stuff is going on. All of this stuff is going on. And uh, the, like as if all of this is going on. And as if that isn't enough, then on Saturday, the Spanish Federation issues yet another statement, like doubling down on its support for Rubiales, saying that he is going to prove his innocence and all this stuff, blah, 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 blah. And yet, like, things then, unfold very quickly, because by Sunday, the Spanish Federation says that it has started an internal investigation into what's going. And then on Monday, I wish I was making this up, but I'm not. Like, again, it's a novella. By Monday, the 28th, Rubiales' mother, a woman named Angeles Bejar, decides to go on a hunger strike by locking herself in a Catholic church in Rubiales' hometown of Motril, in Spain. Now, the irony, of course, of doing a hunger strike in support of her son in a Catholic church is not lost on me, because his mother is claiming that this is, quote, an inhuman, bloodthirsty witch hunt, close quote, against her son. And so she is making her protest known by seeking refuge in an institution that is infamous for its own abuses of power and sexual misconduct that it has covered up while her son is being accused of abuse of power and sexual misconduct that he's trying to cover up. So, no irony there. So, we'll see how that goes as that hunger strike in a Catholic church in Spain by Rubiales' mother continues. Also on Monday, again, because we're not done, the um, the in another attempt to defend Rubiales, the Spanish Federation calls on the European Soccer Federation to suspend Spanish teams um, because they're claiming that, the Spanish government has improperly interfered with the Spanish Federation's activities. And this is like the clearest statement to date that Rubiales and his supporters are willing to see Spanish football burn down to the ground to support in exchange for Rubiales, being able to, I don't know, stick around, right? He is more important than both the men and women's teams and like the viability of the federation as a whole. And that statement was put out by a man named Pedro Rocha, who has taken over while Rubiales is temporarily suspended. And he is Rubiales' right hand man. Apparently, there were eight other vice presidents who could have taken over if Rubiales, with Rubiales being suspended. But apparently, Thursday, the night before his massive speech, Rubiales stripped eight of those nine of their ranks so that in the event that he was suspended, which he was, it was his handpicked guy, Pedro Rocha, who is heading the Spanish Federation now. And so it doesn't sound surprising then, but I mean, still unbelievable that Spanish Federation, as of yesterday, as of the time I'm recording this, so as of Monday, August 28th, was asking the European Federation to basically ban Spain from being able to participate in competitions. Like, this is another thing that is unfortunately so common in these abusive contexts of like just burning everything to the ground um, to protect the person who is in the wrong. This is really common when you see, male employers threatened by female employees because of, their talent or whatever. And that can be of both genders as well. When you have, an employer who feels threatened by the competence of an employee and then, acts out in some way, rather than um fostering that employee and supporting them, right? There is, I don't know, there's a sense of being threatened, right? And then retaliating against that employee. And that's what's happening here. We have an employer, Rubiales, who somehow feels so threatened by women that he would rather just suspend all of the teams rather than admit that he's done something wrong and then and to make amends, to make amends for that. And and on Monday as well, um the Spanish government is also announced that they're investigating potential criminal proceedings against Rubiales. Like, it's this whole mess. And and so much is on the line for Spain right now. Not just the fact of like this player who was taken advantage of and then maligned for it. And rather than spending this week, you know, relishing the highlight of her career and Spain's enormous accomplishment, is having instead to, be putting out statements and getting lawyers and having to defend herself from unacceptable behavior. Like, that the Spanish Federation, because of Rubiales, is willing to just burn everything down to the ground and because of his own ego. Like, Spain is currently bidding for the 2030 Men's World Cup. There are several games coming up in both the Champions League as well as the National League. Vilda, as I mentioned, the women's coach, he's still on even though he has no players or staff, and he has to name a squad very soon for the Nations League. The men's national team has Euro 2024 qualifying games coming up in September. There's a lot on the line for Spain right now in the future of soccer, and that's all being put at risk because of the ego of one man supported by other men who just isn't willing to accept that he's done something wrong and feels so threatened by the idea of accountability that he's willing to lose all of those players and all of those staff if that means preserving his own power. It's just it's outrageous, but also so typical of the power of the yeah of these abusive power um, dynamics. And, on Monday as well, I don't know exactly what happened, but the Spanish Federation, after again requesting that the European Federation remove Spain, suspend Spain from being able to participate, one of the Spanish Federation's committees finally released a statement requesting that Rubiales immediately resign and that there be significant restructuring of the organization. So what's going to happen next? I don't know. The reports seem to be that Rubiales is on his way out. There's just no coming back from what's happened so far. But every day seems to be a new saga, and him digging in his heels all the more, and now his family members coming out in these very bizarre public ways to defend the indefensible. And we'll see what happens. I do want to encourage folks, if you are interested in diving more into this saga, there's been really excellent coverage of this by the following outlets: Just Women's Sports, the Irish Times, The Guardian, and The Defector. I would also recommend there is a piece by Sally Jenkins of the Washington Post that I thought was really good on this. And going back to The Guardian, they've been doing several articles covering this. They also have a cartoonist, David Squires, who has done some hilarious comics on this whole bizarre situation. So I recommend those outlets if you would like to learn more for yourself about all of the ins and outs of this novela. And I want to go back briefly to something that I mentioned earlier on Saturday when, the Spanish Federation put out this statement, saying that like Jenny's a liar and like Rubiales will be proven innocent and all of that. The Spanish Federation also said that, it regrets how they're not able to focus on the women's victory, and instead it's being, overshadowed by this non-sport issue. And that really stuck with me as well because again, it's this classic thing of you created the problem whereby we can't focus on the victory. And now you're claiming, right, like you're twisting the facts to make it seem like the harm that you caused is actually harm that you are suffering. Like the consequences of your actions are now something that actually was imposed upon you, making yourself the victim. It's so gross. And there is definitely a lot of hope that this can change things, and I certainly hope so. But yeah, that additional point was just so gross to me because in addition to everything that we've been covering, the Spanish women's team player Olga Carmona, who scored the winning goal to give Spain the World Cup title, her dad died the same day that they won the Women's World Cup. And that's barely been discussed. And as far as I know, the Spanish Federation of Rubiales hasn't put out any statements or offered her support. So the idea that, like, oh, we're so sad, that we haven't been able to focus on the women's victory. Instead, we're having to just, be focused on this side issue is particularly gross in light of not only your conduct, um, with respect to Jenny Hermoso and some of the other players in terms of your, like, inappropriate touching, but also the fact that you had, like, a star player who lost her dad that day, and, like, that should also be the focus of rallying around that player in her immense joy upon winning the World Cup, as well as immense grief upon losing her dad all in the same day. And neither of those stories are the focus. The focus is on this guy who is clinging desperately onto power because the idea of accountability to him is so threatening, because he believes he's untouchable and has been untouchable for a long time. And because I talk about Brazil a lot in this podcast, I did just have to add in this point that in researching this and reading more about other problems that have come up during Rubiales' tenure as head of the Spanish Soccer Federation, there is a Brazil tie-in as well, because Rubiales has also been criticized for not doing enough about racism. There is a Brazilian player, star player, Vinicius Junior. He plays for Real Madrid and has for several years, and he has consistently faced many racist attacks that have been in the news, and, like, including really, really uh, graphic things, such as an effigy of him being hung, with a rope around its neck on an overpass. Like, really, really grotesque racist behavior by fans while he has played for Real Madrid. And Vinicius, as well as others, have spoken up and criticized the Spanish Federation for not doing more to counteract this racism and to protect their player. Again, protect their employee. Um, and it just spoke to me as well of, like, it just feels unsurprising for someone who clearly doesn't take sexism seriously, because when he's accused of something we all saw him do, he calls those people fake feminists. And so it's not surprising to me that he would also not be taking serious acts of racism, that he would not be taking serious acts of racism seriously either. So I think that's enough. Um, the Spanish novella continues. Let us hope that this is going to result in some serious change, and that the players will be taken seriously, and that this can have ripple effects in women's sports and elsewhere. And let's hope, yeah, that we can get to a point where we are focused on, can just win. We can just win. We can just do our work. We can just be, without having to deal with all of this. Thanks so much for listening. See you next time.